Thank you all for coming. Coming to programs like this helps support our mission at Mass Audubon, and our mission is to protect nature. We do that through education, conservation, and advocacy. This is the last event in our speaker series. I'm really excited. It was a good season. We plan to do it again next year, so keep your eyes open for that. Through this series, we are hoping to deepen your appreciation for the natural world by connecting art and nature and hopefully inspiring a sense of environmental stewardship. And I want to thank the grant that supports this program to make it possible, the Westport and Dartmouth local cultural councils. All right. Okay, so our speaker tonight, Ellen Watson, was born in Charleston, South Carolina, but for the last 40 years has lived and worked in Dartmouth. Growing up in the South on a coastline of miles of salt marshes and the land itself, and the sense of place has always played a significant role. Oh, I can log back in. So good at wording, yeah. And recently, after years of living in New England, the landscape has begun to seep into her work, and she's going to share all about her inspiration from salt marshes tonight. I have heard that when you were little, you used to go into the marsh and take things and then take them back and draw pictures of them. Yes. I was told, and I think that's great. Yes. And also, Ellen, in my friend group, is known as the original Marsh Girl, so she's really inspiring. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. So there's Ellen, and I'll walk you back in.
Okay. So I just found that out that Julia is an old good friend of my daughter's, and they have this, I guess it's a hashtag, Marsh Girl hashtag.
Yeah, we call ourselves the Marsh Girls.
Which I never knew. So, so actually she's been to this house that I'm going to show you in some of the first slides. But
yeah, it's beautiful.
So thanks. So basically when Julia called me, I had to say yes. And then the other sort of big push for me to say yes is that I feel so passionately about salt marshes. I really do. It's but nobody knows it really. I mean, I didn't even know you knew that.
Yeah.
And I must say, a lot of you know me pretty well here. So I apologize if you hear the same thing, the same story over and over again. And I like it when people talk to me. So feel free to interrupt me, ask me whatever you want. So basically, I have to give you, this is the salt marsh, and we'll talk about it in Charleston. And our house is right here. Some of you have been there, Jency. And so I have to give you a little bit of a backstory. But so in Charleston, when I grew up, when it got really hot, basically what they did is you took up the rugs, took up the, took down the curtains, you put white slip covers on everything, you put grass mats down, you'd open the windows, close the shutters, all that kind of stuff. It was a big deal. And so then people who could basically left town because of malaria and mosquitoes. So they either went to the mountains or the beach. And so this is, I was born in 1952. This was still going on then. So my family went to James Island, and which is a little bit south of Charleston. So Charleston Harbor is over there to the left. The Stono River is over here. This is Folly Beach, and then Long Island right here. This is Block Island. That little tiny thing is Morris Island Lighthouse. And so I tried to think how I could possibly explain how different this is from the marshes up here, but also how I came to love it so much. And so when I was a little kid, I was the youngest one. Everybody was older than me. I think my parents had had it, so I had a black nanny who spoke Gullah. And she was from another island over here called Salt Green that was given to their families after the Civil War. And so basically her job was to keep me from falling off the dock and onto the oyster shells and getting all cut up. And she couldn't swim because they weren't allowed to go to the beach, which is very interesting. I think maybe about 10 years later, they, things changed and they could then go to the beach. But anyway, this is obviously a really high tide, but I would lie on that dock, and there's a little creek that came in here at low tide, and I'd just look at the mud, and we call it pluff mud, and it's kind of they're big holes and then they're little holes, and the big holes stone crabs live in, the little holes fiddler crabs, and there are two different kinds of fiddler crabs, brown ones, and they're called Chinaback, are the other ones. And the Chinaback ones are called that because they look like pink china. They have sort of a white back with a little pink design on the top. They're really sort of beautiful. But anyway, I would lie there and I would literally watch the tide come in like inch by inch. And you'd see, and the fiddler crabs they each have their own hole. They come out of the hole and they wave their arms around, sort of like they're playing a violin. And I think they're attracting a mate. But anyway, they have their hole. And I would sit there and watch. It was like Peyton Place or something. Every day something new happened. But so as the tide came in, the crabs would start to come down. And you'd see them try to catch the minnows, and then the big crabs would come and they'd beat up the little crabs. And it was pretty amazing, sort of how much I was totally into this. And also, my nanny, she treated me just the way she treated her kids. The most high-tech piece of equipment we had was a ball of twine. And so she wanted to teach me how to catch fiddler crabs so that we could then go catch sheephead. So in other words, as the tide comes up, and you might do a little crabbing, before the tide gets too high, you have to catch some fiddler crabs to use as bait to catch sheephead. And so and I did a lot of things with her, sort of foraging. She made all kinds of potions and things. I mean, I was too young to really remember. I don't remember. I remember a few names, but I was pretty young. I don't think I think she probably left when I was 6 or 7. So some of those memories are kind of dim, but I still see her grandchildren. But anyway, so all of this is to say that I then basically, you get big enough that you can throw a cast net. So I moved out, and when I was little, I had a little rowboat, and I could be under the dock. When I got a little bigger, I could go down the creek. Eventually, I got so that I could throw a cast net. And I have a picture of a cast net later on. But I could throw a cast net, and I got a 10-horsepower motor, which was a big deal. And so it's kind of amazing to me now, I mean, having kids, that I was allowed, I went anywhere I wanted, really. I mean, I think they watched me at the beginning at high tide. They could probably see me with binoculars, go out to Mars Island. But so I went out to Mars Island. I went all over the place. There are also a lot of islands, just tons of them. This one is Long Island, and it's, I think it's 4,000 acres. It had wild ponies on it, and called them marsh tackies. So I spent a lot of time right there. So this is just the sun coming up. Okay, so this is not one of my friends. I actually got this at a book of oystering. You might be familiar with it, Jency. Famous book on oystering. But anyway, the reason I'm showing you this is I wanted to talk about what's different about the marshes down there as opposed to here. One is we have pluff mud, which I mentioned before, super black, super sticky. You'll like if you're trying to catch a fiddler crab, you'll go up above your knees. But so there's a lot of skill in catching a fiddler crab. All these things, a lot of patience. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say is that the distance is just huge. When I would go out in the marsh, there was nobody else there, literally, in that whole slide. There was not another person except for these guys. And there were probably about 4 of them. And these were sort of family friends. My parents looked up to them because they knew everything about the marshes. And they took care of me, basically. So, they would see me way the heck out there. I'd shear a pin, I'd run out of gas. Something goofy would happen. I would just be stuck out there. And so they would say, oh, here's Mr. Lewis's daughter, and they'd get me home. But the other thing that was interesting is I always felt safe in the marshes. So like if there's a really strong tide, you can't really row against it. You aren't going to get home. But you could always just pull up into the marsh, wait for the tide to change, and you could get home. But so I think, I guess what I really want to say is I don't think that many kids had that much. There's probably 10 miles in one direction to Charleston Harbor, 10 miles in the other direction to the Stono River. And so I did as far as I could go with my 10 horsepower motor and then my 15 horsepower motor. And so it really is unusual how few people there were out there and how comfortable I was. And so when you go shrimping, there's all this other cool stuff you get. You get mullet, you get flounder, you get squid, garfish, just all kinds of amazing stuff. And then, of course, you want to throw them back if you're not going to eat them. And so then the porpoises show up and the birds. So it's kind of an amazing, I think it's sort of unusual. So basically every summer from, I don't know, until, at least 3, until I went away to college, that's what I was doing. I was in those marshes by myself a lot of the time, just kind of tooling around. You might think, boy, that really is a weird person. I did have other friends. I went to summer camp, I went to the beach, I went to the mountains. But I spent a lot of time just out in the marshes by myself. And I think the point of sort of showing you all this stuff is that I think I learned 2 things that have really stuck with me. And one is this sense of being in the moment, just totally in the moment. And also of a very connected and fluid universe, that everything was connected. Because as a little kid, I would see and catch the white shrimp come in July, the brown shrimp come in August. And they were incredibly beautiful and just magical. Brown shrimp had pink legs. And so that was a sort of really deeply held belief, this connection, they're all connected. And everything, so much of, so much of what I did at the time was, now when I look back, comes back to that, to spending all that time in those marshes. I think I was really lucky and very fortunate. And so, and the other thing, which I'll try not to talk about it too long, but I think I really learned from being out there is I learned how to see. And I used to teach drawing, and there's so many different ways of learning. Somebody who's might say, well, what do you mean? You learn how to see. But there's so many different ways of seeing. And so, think about when you're driving a car, and you're just kind of zipping along. You're looking at how much space there is, the signs. Think of all things you don't see. Like, I know the botanists in here understand that. So, if you're a botanist, your little brain ticks along in a different way, like serrated leaves, all that kind of stuff. And so, an artist is the same way. They have to learn to look for certain things, like where are the lines? What is a contour line? What is a cross contour line? So I really feel as if, I don't know, I had a really wonderful time. So I wish, I tried to think of how I could talk about how magical it was, but it just really was. I was so fortunate to be out there. So now I'm going to talk about my work a little bit, and I'm going to go through these slides faster because mostly I'm going to try to talk about how the marsh influenced my work instead of the work itself. So if you want to ask me something, just interrupt me. So a lot of you might know me from these. This is probably what I'm most known for around here the most, is these small bronzes. And when I first went to college, I was a wildlife management major and a botany major. But I'd always been drawing and painting, and I finally thought, well, if I'm an artist, I can do everything. I can still do botany, and I can do all this stuff. And so I'll major in art. So I got an undergrad degree in painting and a graduate degree in sculpture. And so I would say most of my training as an artist was very traditional, working from the model a lot. And what's interesting is that teaching art can be really trendy, and when I was in art school, it was really unpopular to work from a model. There weren't very many, there were certainly models, but there weren't that many around. They were hard to find, they were expensive. And so I had the same problem when I went to graduate school. That it was just not the thing. It was welded steel was what was going on in sculpture, or Decibero, that kind of stuff. And so I was frustrated. I didn't have a model, so I went to the vet school at the University of Georgia. They had this huge vet school that was really amazing. If you wanted to study horses, they'd have like 20 Shetland ponies in a circle, cadavers. Just wild stuff. Operator on horses, they had the operating tables that went up and down and all this stuff. But anyway, so I worked it there for quite a while. And I drew a lot of dogs, a lot of horses. My dog was actually a Feely dog. So in other words, you get the cadaver dog, and you'd find everything on the cadaver, and but then you had to find it on the real dog. And so my dog thought that was just lots of fun. Yeah. And so I actually taught at the College of Charleston for a while, and just by chance happened to make friends with this guy at the Medical University who taught anatomy. And I've always, as you can tell, just from my interest in the marshes and all those critters in the marshes, I've always really liked the intersection between the arts and the sciences. So he said, sure, you can come draw there. So again, I had this kind of unusual background so I drew from cadavers for a couple of years. they made me so welcome. So basically the students would get a cadaver, they'd dissect it, take everything out, put everything back in, and then they'd give it to me. So this was mine. And he actually committed suicide. But again, sort of an unusual, and hearing more just from that time. I'm going to go kind of quickly. So at the same time, I was beginning, so this is just part of my education. This is an early bronze. And you're going to see some things over and over again. This is me, my dog, and I have a shrimp on my ear. And so a lot of my graduate work was fiberglass figures that were tall, that were very light. And I started doing installations with sound. And one of the reasons I did that actually is sculpture departments were really macho when I was there. I ended up being the only girl left. One of the other ones just said, can't take it anymore, I'm leaving. And so rather than saying, okay, I need a truck with a crane and, I gotta get these guys to help me, I decided I'm going to make big things that are light. And so that was how I started working with fiberglass. And so I did these large figures. I did portrait heads a lot at that time. This was obviously somebody's child, but I just pumped them out. Good education. Parents never like anything you do with their children. They're never handsome enough, or it's a rough education, rough way to make a living. But anyway, this is in here because I wanted to say that sculptors tend to fall into all kinds of categories, like you're a welder, you work with clay, and neon, and all kind of wood. But so my thing was mold making. So this was, I actually had a job, worked at a natural history museum for a while, making life-size fiberglass Indians. Which was, again, a real education because she thought this was this Jewish guy who was the right height and weight and everything for, for this time period. I think he was a Neolithic Indian or something. I don't know. But I don't know, this was quite the education. So this is sort of my training. So this is also my work. And so this is where, again, the marshes start to come into it. So I had this, I would say, pretty traditional training because I did painting first, worked from the model a lot of sciences, was a mold maker. And I got this great job as a visiting artist in North Carolina. And they gave you a state car, a state studio. It was wonderful. But very quickly they decided that a single woman could not have a nude model. And so I thought, well, that's okay, I can go in, they can sign those on, or we will go in that. But so then we also had to talk to school groups. So I had to talk to first graders, whatnot. So you can imagine how popular my cadavers were, first graders. So I had to come up with another way to, talk about. So I started talking about just sculpture in general. And I got banned from all the public schools in North Carolina for showing slides of Greek sculpture. Yeah, it's really interesting. And so anyway, it was you know, I had to sort of fight my way through the education process to want to work with the figure. It was not cool anymore. And so then I get here and, you know, anyway, it's very interesting. So I thought, what? I'll just do something that they really don't know what to do with, you know, and they'll just leave me alone, which works. So I totally changed. And so this is a kind of grass that it grows around here, and it grows, I think, a little taller on the south for Andrew Kogon, and I've always loved it. And there were big fields of it. It reminds me of Marshes in the south. And so I started, if you've ever been in, well, lots of people now do it, but they'll cornrow their hair, those will divide it up into squares and plait it. So essentially that's what I did here. And again, it probably comes from my nanny and growing up with so many African Americans. But so you would see, like, you would see the shape of the skull, and then you'd see the shape of the field. And so I did this, and so I did all kinds of funny things. That was bamboo. Here's another field. So this is, I had moved up here. And this is actually the Children's Museum. I got a grant for this. But I did grass installations for quite a while. This is Phragmites. And I don't know if you're familiar with Phragmites. I hate Phragmites. It's invasive. So of course I can have all of it that I want. Nobody minds if I go cut it down. So this is after a poem by Gertrude Stein that says, "No dogs bark at the moon." I mean, that's the title of the poem. And it's basically about, her poem is that dogs don't bark at the moon because they can't see it anymore because of light pollution. It's kind of funny. Kind of a nice poem. But so this piece, in my mind, was about how houses used to be situated, like on the top of a hill or near water, or they were really carefully placed, and now they're just wherever you can stick them. You know, particularly in this, where I'm from, you know, Charleston, the development is just unbelievable. Any little tiny piece of land is taken. I mean, where it really shouldn't be. But anyway, so I gradually, I'm not particularly interested in installations because I feel as if what you're really left with is a photograph. And I'm interested in the object. I've always had this interest in indigenous art. Again, when I was in school, there weren't many classes in Mexican, African art. You had to look hard for them. But anyway, so I began to move back into making objects and gallery objects. But, I mean, you can still, I don't know, this is this grass called Mullenbergia. Charleston is famous for these sweetgrass baskets, and they're made of Mullenbergia, Pinus palustris, that's pine needles, and a kind of juncus. I can't remember the species. But, so like, all of this is, goes back to the marshes. So this stuff, like the island near me where my nanny was a little too salty to have these materials. It's too close to the ocean. It's very interesting. Marshes are, but anyway, so that's Mullenbergia. This is Spanish moss. These are bones. Oh, and the other thing, which I forgot to say, when I've long had this thing for bones, and that actually goes back to Morris Island as well. My days traipsing over to Morris Island. because it used to be I could go out to Marseille and there would always be a dead loggerhead turtle. And of course I took them all home. But so basically the fishermen would, they'd wrap their nets, so they'd chop them up, throw them over. And they changed that, so now the nets, you don't see that anymore. But I used to have a huge collection of dead loggerhead turtles. And this is, this is a different kind of grass than anaphylodon, but these are goose feet cast. These are more ribs, sassafras. Those, another thing I actually didn't talk about, but those are alligator scales, and I did, if you go, I don't know, has anybody here heard of the Ace Basin? I know Josie has. No? So the Ace Basin is south of Charleston. It stands for the Ashpoo, Combahee, and Edisto rivers come together. And it's a marshland of 1.5 million acres. And so basically what's amazing is that you could just go there from my little dock in my little boat. And the only thing that kept me from doing is I had to get home. We occasionally spent the night on Morris Island, but all the other islands were so mosquito-y, you would never make it through the night. But so I had to get home, so I'd go as far as I could. But anyway, I did grow up hunting in the Ace Basin and hunting in front of our house. So, I don't know, the taxidermy, the cadaver, I have all these interests sort of going along the same way, but these are really beautiful. But so I call these totems, and to me they're very figurative. To me it's going back to the figure. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but anyway. So this piece is bronze, made up of a ton of different pieces. I think 20 took 20 molds to cast this. And the way that came about, so the reason I'm telling you about this is kind of how I ended up where I am now in those bowls of veggies. But so I worked at a foundry as their mold maker. And so I put the sprues and the vents on the piece before it was going to be cast. And so I could just put all kinds of stuff on other people's work. So I started putting tea bags, orange peels, and I eventually started putting twigs and leaves and feathers and kind of useful things. So I cast a lot of this stuff on somebody else's work, and nobody really cares because you cut off the sprues and vents and throw it away. Well, we melt it back in and use it again. So nobody really minded that I was doing this. But so I ended up with, and then these were cast in a bunch of different pieces. But anyway, so that piece has a long history. It was stolen, cut up into more pieces. Do you remember this, Jancy? Yeah, it was a nightmare. It's kind of a miracle that it's made it. But anyway, so this is from my teaching at UMass Dartmouth. UMass Dartmouth has a foundry. And even though I taught drawing most of the time, Stacy Lapp was great. Rick Creighton spent a lot of time casting things in the foundry downstairs. So this is like bittersweet, a magnolia, a titmouse. And so these were tied together with rigorous twine and then cast, basically burned at it. So it's like a cremation for the bird. He's cremated.
How did you get the bird?
So, what?
How did you get the bird?
Oh, gosh, I think we had cats at the time. Yeah, that was no problem. Yeah, actually, to be honest, everybody at UMass, I was kind of known as the taxidermy person. So whenever there was a dead body, they would call me. So I had, yeah, no, and you can ask my husband, I still have a lot of bodies in my freezer. Yeah. So, and actually the really bad part is that when you're upstairs teaching drawing, you could smell those birds getting burned at it. So in a case like this, very similar, except this is a flicker, and he's too big to cast solid. So like if bronze should be, I don't know, anything over ½ an inch is going to shrink a lot when it cools, and so he would crack. So I would make a mold of him, and he would be wax. So this is how I got into all the crazy things I do now. So this is actually called Unsquared Dance by Dave Brubeck. And I just did a lot of these kind of constructions. And then these, I did a ton of these plates. This is wisteria. That one's poplar. Might be away. That's poplar as well, elm. But basically for me, they were a big learning curve. I was learning how to do these patinas. I did a piece at a foundry, a really famous foundry called Talix in New York, and oh my God, they're so amazing. They have people that just do patinas. I mean, there are only a couple places in the country that do that.
You want to explain what a patina is?
Well, it's so when it's a bunch of chemicals that you put on top to give it a color. So the most common one is this one, liver of sulfur. And there's cupric, there's ferric nitrate, all kinds of stuff. But so that is just, there's so much to learn about it. So that's kind of what I was doing. This is trumpet vine pods. So a lot of that is just me trying to learn some more. So this is a piece also done locally. This was for a DNRT show at the Southern Selection Reserve. Yeah, and so this piece ties together. These are fiberglass coats, and there are 3 of them. Here's one in the snow. But they basically tie together a lot of things that I've been doing over just my whole life. Going back to the figure, some of it has to do with green men imagery, which just happens all over the world, sort of relationship of people to their environment. And the other thing, which is sort of odd, but I know it's a big part of it, is I was very influenced by the civil rights movement. It was big when I was in high school. Ralph Abernathy walked by my school, and I was struck by how dignified they were, that they had on coats, overcoats and ties, and they were just so dignified. So anyway, that's kind of in there as well. And this is another one of my green men. So this is small. And he has little leaves, and he's got green man coat and a newspaper in his hand. He's in a tie. He's going to work.
When you say things are fiberglass, does that mean you put a sheathing on top of them, or?
Where, good question. Yeah, so usually what I did is the same thing Don does, is a boat builder, but so I would make a mold. And it could be a rubber mold, or it could be a plaster mold, and you put a different mold release in it, but you lay it up the way you would a boat or a surfboard, and so you laying up on the inside of the curve. And so that's actually how I met Don, was buying fiberglass from him when I first was here. And I learned how to put, you can put powdered bronze, I mean, like you see it in all the catalogs, you can put powdered bronze, and you know all the pots you get that are light? They're some kind of like polyester resin with some kind of filler. And so that's what I did in graduate school, was all these tons of fillers. But it's, again, it's not great for your health.
But she asked about the coats.
Yeah. I know.
Oh, okay. So did I answer your question?
No.
No.
No? Wait, so what
Well,
was,
for example, I saw the coast, the river.
oh, I know what you're
And so,
You're right. I didn't make these this
did
way.
you have a coat?
I had a real coat,
Okay.
yeah.
That you sheathed with your.
I saturated it with polyester resin, and then I covered it with dirt.
Dirt.
Dirt, yeah, like I put them in our dusty driveway, literally, and kicked dirt up on them. Yeah, so they're basically, the patina in the outside is dirt. Dirt.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I was in graduate school, that's what I did, was, that was my thing. That was my graduate work, was working with polyester resin and fillers. But I kind of was never really happy with it, with plastics, for a lot of reasons. I don't know, bronze is such a, I think it's the ultimate environmental thing. You know, if you don't like it, you can just melt it down. I just think it's the best stuff, and it's very soft. But anyway, did that answer your question? So they were real coats. Yeah, I went to the Salvation Army, and you got them.
So you went to the fiberglass because bronze was too heavy, or you either had to make small bronze or big fiberglass?
I wanted to make big pieces, and you know, everybody around me was investing in trucks with cranes and muscles, and I thought, I'm just going in a different direction. So that's why I started working in fiberglass.
So did you take, when we think of fiberglass, we think of a chunk of white.
Yeah.
Did you carve that?
No.
Okay. So you
No.
got a liquid fiberglass?
So, well, if you have a mold,
Okay.
you put a gel coat on, like a boat, and so that would be the outside layer. So it could be bronze, it could be aluminum, it could be dirt. I use clay a lot, so I'd end up with kind of different colors of clay. And then you lay out more and more resin, and then you put the fiberglass mat, like a cloth. And you kind of put it in.
Wow. You don't have any pictures
Of me
of
doing
the
it?
process?
No, I don't. Don probably does.
No.
Taking fiberglass onto the surface and then shaping it?
No,
No.
no, the mold is big time important. Yeah, and so you want to have a good mold, and then you want to put a mold release in there. And that can vary a lot from what you're casting, what the mold release is.
But you just how you then get the fiberglass part
You pat it on with, you sort of pat it in with more resin.
The resin being sort of the glue.
Yeah, it's liquid,
Okay.
and you put a hardener in it.
Okay.
Yeah, and
I just remember casting in plaster. We had to line it with oil or something so that it would release.
Right, well, plaster is so much fun, but well, number one, it's cheap. But you can also, you can cast wax directly into plaster if the plaster is wet. And so it's so lovely. Yeah. So a lot of all those plates I made, I would actually go to junk store. Anyway, I'd find plates that I like the shape of, or very often earthenware, and so I'd make plaster molds of them, and then I'd recast plates. So that's sort of how I came up with those plates.
But those are bronze.
Then, so I'd cast a wax, and then I'd burn it out and put bronze in.
That's the lost black.
Right. So,
Okay,
I just don't want to keep you all.
that's all right.
But yeah, the sculpture is, it's just, gosh, so much to know, and you, I don't know, you just constantly are, kind of getting buffeted by what sells and what, I don't know, there's just so many decisions along the way. So this is one of the bigger pieces I've done. This was a commission, and I think this is bronze. And this was just, I don't think I'll ever have a customer like that again, who kind of gave me a lot of freedom to do what I really thought was the right approach in a lot of different ways. So like basically when I did this, in my mind, I wanted it in a field, and this hip would look like a rock from a distance. And then you come up and you discover that it was my rock. And that's not how this person sees it. She sees it differently, and which is all, that's what it's all about. So this is one of the first times I had the opportunity to put everything together. All the plants from the Marshes, and go back to the figure. These are all various twigs that, I don't know, you get, so you kind of think about how bronze moves, so, and how it's going to cool. I don't know, it's very interesting which things cast well and which don't. So this is a recent, not that recent a piece, but this is at the Bedford Art Museum right now. That's my daughter. And so you can see I'm sort of I have the plants, but I'm going back to the gallery in a sense. So these are, I don't want to keep you too long. I just have a couple more of these and then some sort of ending ones at the end. But these are, again, just green man figures. These have leaves, birds' heads. He's got gold on his head. Here's another one. So I think these are the last two slides of my work, but the interesting thing to me is that this is here's a coat, green man imagery, and this is a shrimp tail. And so, and this is, I call this king shrimp. So it's a shrimp head. But so basically, here it is, 40 years later, and I didn't really think about it till Julia asked me to do this, and I was kind of going through stuff, and it's like, oh wow, here it is, 40 years later, and I'm still doing shrimp. I'm still thinking about shrimp, and so anyway, these are just a couple of other sort of interesting things. So this is the cast net. This is my nephew, actually, who's now a fishing guide and knows more than I will ever know about marshes. But those nets, again, those black guys I showed you at the beginning, they shrimped in the summer, collect the oysters in the winter, and then in between, they knit these nets. They're all handmade. When I was growing up, they were beautiful. You could rip them and fix them. Now they're all, yeah, plastic monofilament, and you throw them away when there's a hole in them. And they would dip them in tar so that the shrimp, they couldn't see it when it sunk. Very cool. And so these are the things that I was looking at when I was
So
in
is
school.
it true that those cast nets come directly from Africa?
I think so, but I don't really know that. I'm almost done.
Oh, yeah, take your time.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, it's like 3 more
Yeah,
slides.
keep going.
What was the question? The
What?
question was, did the cast net design come from Africa?
I don't really know that.
I've seen it in the Middle East too.
Oh, really? Yeah, I would guess it's all over the world. But anyway, when I was supposed to be looking at Italian sculpture, this is the stuff I'm really looking at. This is from New Zealand, Maori. And these are duck breasts, which just blows me away. So, you know, I used to hunt ducks, and I don't know, it's very, this is another Maori duck blanket. And if you've ever been to the MFA in Boston, they used to have a belt with hummingbirds on it. I don't know if anybody saw that. I mean, just amazing, like 30 hummingbirds. This is sort of a bad slide, but this is from the Cameroons. So this is a coat. This is my fascination with coats. The coat you put on to take you to the spirit world. So, you know, this is a huge influence on me. I tried to go to the Cameroons, didn't make it. So, again, I just love the marshes. In the summer, they're bright green and sort of tropical and bright blue. And then in the winter, this looks like that amphipogon grass that I love so much. And this is the last slide. This is the Ace Basin. And I tried to I could not find a good picture, but the point I wanted to make is that now you can go to these places and get out your phone and you know exactly where you are. But when I was a kid, you could go down one of these creeks and you really didn't know where it was going to end up. And so sometimes you have to turn around and go all the way back. But I mean, the Ace Basin is just gigantic. It's like going back, you know, imagine 1.5 million acres of marshes. But anyway, so that's my last slide.
Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Except for the ducks that you just mentioned, you don't seem to be impacted or talk about marsh birds that were there.
You know, no, I could talk about marsh birds forever. I could close my eyes and at night I would hear the porpoises breathing because they go up and down the creek, and marsh hens cackling. The marsh hens are big, sort of in my universe, yeah.
Were there ospreys out there?
Yes, there are ospreys. The birds have changed a lot lately. Now we have eagles, wood storks, spoonbills, we have all kinds of stuff we didn't used to have. But yeah, marsh hens are big. They sort of run around in the marsh like chickens. Yeah. I would say that's an interesting question. My family was obsessed with fishing and shrimping. And my bird education was not that great until I came up here and I worked with Jamie at the Lloyd Center for a little while. But, I mean, there were terns and oyster catchers and all kinds of good stuff.
Any other questions?
Back to the coats and the fiberglass. I understand a little bit about how you do stuff with fiberglass.
how would you get the coat in those positions? How did you,
Boy, you know how to ask the questions. Yeah, that was awful. No, I had to make basically a chicken wire person and put the coat on this chicken wire and then sort of partially do it and then get the chicken wire out. Yeah, no, it was rough. I would actually like to do more coats like that, but in bronze. But again, I don't know, there's so many different ways to approach it, you know, and I don't know. One of my issues is I don't have water in my studio, so if I make plaster molds, I do it in the summer, I don't know. It's all very complicated.
Sounds complicated.
I know. But yeah, you just figure it out. I don't know.
Anything else?
what's next for you?
What's next for
Miss
you?
Deborah,
What's next for you?
what's next for me then? I was afraid somebody would ask me. I don't know, you know, when COVID came along, I actually had a commission lined up, and I was kind of going along on this path, and then they decided they didn't have enough money. And so part of me wants to keep going with bronze. It's very expensive. So like one little twig is about $200. So, you know, you can spend a lot of money really fast and just experimenting. So I don't really know. The indigenous part of me thinks, no, maybe I'll just use something cheap, available, ready. We'll see. But you might have heard me say to Blair that, did you ever know Mark St. Pierre?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever see his studio? Yeah, I mean, so Mark had this studio that's like so beautifully organized, you know. So that's my goal in life. Anyways, I don't think sculptors think like that really, but I'm trying to be more like that. So I've been rearranging my studio to make it a little more efficient. So that's what I've been doing, some house projects, but I'll go back to it. I mean, I won't just leave it, but I'm not quite sure what direction it'll be.
I think three of us have commissioned one of those Marsh girls laying in grass.
Yes, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Really beautiful.
I love one of the dogs.
Yeah, it really looks like that.
Thank you. Well, I hate to say that was a life mold.
Oh.
You know, that, so, you know, you
She
actually
got her face in there.
put the plaster on her face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was her.
Yeah, it looks like her.
The same with the marsh girl? How did you do the marsh, the pro?
Oh, the line.
Oh, the woman lying down?
Yeah.
I did her in clay, so I made an armature underneath it. So I had a big piece of plywood, a bunch of stuff underneath it, steel, styrofoam, all kinds of stuff. Put clay on top.
It wasn't a model you were doing, this is all you? Or was it?
No, I did have a model.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it was covered in bronze?
No, it's never that easy. No, I did it in clay, and then you make a rubber mold, and then you take it to the foundry, and they put wax in the rubber mold, and then they make another mold, you put that in the kiln, they burn out all the wax, and then they put the bronze in.
Wow.
It's really, and so I did go for that. I remember you were from Sicily.
Oh, yeah, well.
Yeah. But so I have been to Cape Casada in Italy, and then I worked in an art foundry. The whole process of lost wax casting is just fascinating. Yeah. I wish, yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. It was really great to have you.